Welcome to another edition of Daily Airline News, and we're still focusing on the search for MH370. I'm Jeffrey Thomas, and joined once again by my co-host Richard Godfrey in Germany. Good morning, Richard.
Good afternoon, Jeffrey.
And we're going to revisit Armada 7806 and our Chinese friends. Can you give us an update, please, Richard?
Sure. Armada 7806 is still in the survey area east of the Philippines, around 143 nautical miles to 165 nautical miles off the coast of northern Philippines. This location is within the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines, which extends out 200 nautical miles from the coast. And Armada 7806, we're showing a screenshot, is still conducting this grid survey of that area.
Mm. And the Chinese?
And the Chinese, TYSH, heading home for Sanya in China, but have stopped a number of times en route. Obviously, checking numbers of locations around the coast of Australia. And if I was Australian, I would be feeling uncomfortable about the Chinese going all the way around Australia and doing all this checking. Um, TYSH initially expected to arrive back home on the 30th of April, but due to these various stops, has now updated its ETA back home till the 3rd of May. Don't know quite what they're up to in all these locations, but we will try and investigate and find out.
Well, the media in Australia, for those who don't realise, they're covering a federal election, which is in 2 weeks' time, and I think they're fairly well preoccupied with the vagaries of both sides of politics at the moment, so not to worry about the Chinese. When the previous group of Chinese vessels was going around Australia, the media were all over it, but that was before the election was called. Now, we're going to do a poll, as we mentioned. Richard, can you give us the details on that?
Yeah, it's a very simple and straightforward poll. The poll question, will MH370 be found? Question mark. And what I would request is you only use three answers: yes, neutral, or no, because that'll make it very simple to total up the views and the opinions of everyone. So, yes, neutral, or no to the question, will MH370 be found?
Sounds simple, but I'm sure we'll get some variations on that, but that's okay.
That's that was the same with the survey we did previously, but we asked
Yeah,
people to use the keyword survey. They use just about every other keyword too. But if you
that's
could use the keyword poll, that would be wonderful. It makes life a lot easier. Otherwise, if I detect a yes or a neutral or a no, or some kind of clear answer to the question, will MH370 be found? Um, I will take it as a valid result.
great. So we've had a swag of questions from Richard's deep dive into tracking of aircraft yesterday. So from Angela McCraw, 8656, please could you ask Richard if sometime this summer, got a few months here, Richard, he could tell me if Jet2, EasyJet, Ryanair, etc., from England to Europe have updated crash radar, GADS, distress tracking system, and all the other systems available. I'd really appreciate this. I would like to say again, as I always do, I know you two are awesome and so knowledgeable. I would trust you both with my life. Well, that's a big ask, big statement, but we'll take it, Angela. Many thanks for your time, Jeffrey Thomas and Richard Godfrey. But before Richard answers, let me chime in here. with the safety side of things, Jet2, EasyJet, Ryanair, those three you've named, really crackerjack airlines, the best of the best when it comes to their style of operation. But Richard, over to you.
Yeah, and in terms of the specific question on GADS and ADT, all three airlines have also purchased new aircraft. So these new aircraft will have GADS ADT systems, but there have been no public announcements made by Jet2, EasyJet, or Ryanair regarding retrofit plans for their existing fleet. So I think the jury's out on whether they keep up their impeccable safety track record. But Angela, I hope you enjoy your holiday, whether you fly Jet2, EasyJet, or Ryanair for your holiday.
So from Bandit Darville, some have suggested that upon finding MH370, they will look at who is in the cockpit. But if I was the one trying to hide this plane in the ocean after all this planning and preparation, I would make certain that I was not in the cockpit at the time of the impact with the ocean. Also, if the impact was high energy, as evidence suggests, then the cockpit could easily be very fragmented. So finding who was at the controls upon impact might be impossible. We need to find the wreckage, then we'll know more, but how much more depends on what we find. Interesting observation from Bandit.
Yes, it is. And of course, if we don't look, then we can't find. And if it is completely fragmented into a million pieces, then we aren't going to be able to find much in the way of DNA evidence, if at all. But if it's not fragmented into a million pieces and the cockpit is intact to a certain extent, then we may find DNA evidence. If we have an intact cockpit, but there is no DNA evidence, i.e., no active pilot until the end, that would also be a helpful piece of information because it would mean there was definitely not an attempted ditching by an active pilot at the end of the flight. So again, we come back to this uh, absence of evidence and evidence of absence. We have to be very careful, but a negative result it can be quite useful, as useful as a positive result. So we're interested in both, Bandit Darville.
From Greg Renzel 2608, how are they going to keep this new system from being turned off?
Very good question. The new systems are autonomous and work from a battery and are not reliant on any aircraft power supply. And if someone was tampering with the new system, it might be difficult because some of them are actually located on the trailing edge of a wing or right in the tail cone. So, you have to know where to find this new system. But someone tampering with the electrical power or data feed is treated by the system as this in the same way as the distress situation, i.e., as soon as power is lost externally or the data feed is lost, the system says, "Aha, I'm now in distress mode," and goes into this autonomous mode of operation. Uh, just to let you know, the battery life of an autonomous mode operation is about 12 to 20 hours, depending on the manufacturer and the system model.
From Demi online, I actually find this amazing. A 24-foot yacht must have an EPIRB if it ventures offshore. The EPIRB must be positioned so that it'll float on the surface if the boat sinks. EPIRBs have saved thousands of lives, even for bushwalkers. Surely a $500 EPIRB can be installed in the fuselage of an aircraft, regardless of size, that will release and trigger on impact or when it comes into contact with water. Honestly, I can figure this out and come up with something on paper that could be installed on every plane for under 5,000. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, good point. I sail myself, so I know what you're talking about. The problem is there are more stringent regulations for aircraft systems than yachts. For example, there are temperature and pressure changes at altitude which a yacht does not have to cope with on the ocean surface. So there's a thing called the International Standard Atmosphere, ISA, and the standard on the surface of the Earth or ocean is 15 degrees Celsius and 1013.25 HPA or millibar pressure. At 40,000 feet altitude, the temperature is minus 56.5 degrees Celsius and the pressure is only 187.5 HPA. The density of the air is much less, and there are a number of other physical parameters that will change with altitude. And a system for an aircraft has to be able to cope with these differences of temperature and pressure and air density and so on. So that's what makes them expensive. And cost has been raised by a number of people. But on the other hand, this is now mandated for all new aircraft, and many airlines are retrofitting their older aircraft. So cost, I don't think, seems to be the issue.
So from Royden 007, which is actually Paul. Hi guys, I'm really impressed with what you're doing here and have been watching many videos about what you're offering is unprecedented. I have many queries, but with your latest information on AWACS and Poseidon aircraft going south into the Indian Ocean within 24 hours, of the loss of MH370 would suggest USA must have better intelligence than they are sharing with the investigation team. Your suggestion that they used Inmarsat data seems a bit odd. I thought the Inmarsat took over a week to disseminate the information that they had. Please explain. We have explained that
Yeah,
before, but you can explain it again.
we'll explain it again. Inmarsat changed their system to distribute and archive BTO and BFO data in 2011. This is 3 years before MH370 disappeared. They did it on the basis of the Air France 447 incident, which happened back in 2009. Inmarsat made a public announcement only a few days after the disappearance of MH370 on the 14th of March, but that was a public announcement. Authorities from the US, UK, France, and other countries all had the Inmarsat data immediately on the 8th of March 2014 at 0116 UTC, following the lack of response to the hourly ground station interrogation of MH370. So at 0116 UTC on the 8th of March, everyone knew MH370 is no longer responding to the satellite communication, and that triggered an alert in many countries and many authorities.
Indeed. And that ground station, by the way, is just north of where I am right now in Perth, Western Australia. Now, Fayaz Ahmed 1281, straightforward question. In 2025, could MH370 happen again?
Straightforward answer, yes.
Yeah.
But but
But
much less likely, and only with certain airlines from certain countries, and only on older or smaller aircraft. For example, an older Boeing 777, which is used for the MH370 flight, which has not yet been retrofitted with an ADT, well, that could still happen again and disappear without trace. Or another example is the Boeing 747. There are still 427 in operation. Many of those are now just cargo operations and not passenger operations, but there are still Boeing 747 in passenger operation, and they quite likely will not have an ADT retrofitted. So, a bit yes and no. In answer to your question, Faisal.
So Dan-NT2 Yankee Bravo asks or says, thank you for another informative, interesting segment. It appears that two people in the cockpit at all times rule varies from country to country. And here in Canada, the rule was implemented shortly after March 24, 2015 Germanwings disaster, then lifted in 2017 due to opposition from a strong pilot union and assurances that mental health screening is robust and adequate. What are your views on this practice, and would it really help to have, say, a flight attendant or other non-trained pilot standing in the cockpit? Would flight attendant unions even accept that added responsibility and potential ramifications? Thanks, Dan from Victoria, Canada. It's a very, very good question, Dan. Richard, your assessment on that?
Yeah, I mean, there is a huge variation from airline to airline and country to country. So it's wonderful that the mental health screening is robust and adequate in Canada, but is it robust and adequate everywhere? In my personal view, the answer lies in a standardization of the medical examination that every pilot has to undergo on a regular basis. And if you look at some of the medical examination forms, the number of actual measurements made, temperature, pulse, blood pressure, are very few, and the number of perfunctory checkbox items is can be quite long on some of these forms. So aspects like mental capacity or the state of the nervous system or indeed mental health and or current medication quite often glossed over on some of these forms. So we need to address those, in my view, in a standardized manner worldwide.
Yeah. Now, Miranda Hot Spring 4019. Now, we've heard from Miranda before. I remember that name. An aircraft have a transponder. Why don't the manufacturers just hardwire them in on commercial aircraft so no one on board is able to turn them off?
We've covered this many times before,
We have,
haven't we?
Miranda. Yeah.
The key answer is that ground clutter at a busy airport, if everyone's got their transponder switched on and all the ground vehicles have a transponder, you can imagine in a busy airport it can be quite cluttered. The other major reason is if there's a system failure with the transponder and it's repeatedly transmitting the wrong location, it can actually trigger off a near miss or an anti collision avoidance process. So we don't want that when it's not necessary. So there are genuine reasons why you need to be able to switch off a transponder, unfortunately, Miranda.
And also with all the electrical systems, you need to switch them off if there's a if there's a electrical fault of some kind as well. That's why you
Yep.
need to be able to. So that's another dynamic to this that is important. Now, Pat Bradford 3244, gentlemen, thank you for your intelligent science-based analysis of MH370. A couple of questions about GADS. If a pilot does not declare a pan-pan or mayday, do other systems tell or activate the GADS that the plane is in a critical situation? It seems logical GADS would be on 24/7, so to speak. Question two, can anyone see the data being generated? Can the data be hacked? Question three, there's three questions. Do the military of various countries already use these systems? Thank you in advance for your response. And Pat is in Tallahassee, Florida.
Yeah. So one by one, GADS has the capability to detect a deviation from the flight plan or an unexpected change in the flight path. It's not reliant on the pilot issuing a pan-pan or mayday call. There are some systems that can stream the data via satellite as soon as there is a distress situation. This is not public data, it's on a secure network. But of course, with the right equipment and the right insider system knowledge, it could be hacked. GADS is a system for commercial aircraft. It's not used on military aircraft. The military typically use other tracking systems for all of their personnel and assets in a field of operation, whether they're in distress or not. They have obviously completely different demands and requirements. So military systems are completely different to the GADS system.
From Paul B, 1034, did investigators learn anything from the MH370 captain's flight simulator or his historic internet usage about the ditching position of the aircraft?
Well, Paul, there are many investigators. In particular, I would point you to the investigation done by Victor Unello and Yves Guillaume into the captain's flight simulator. At the end of the flight, the last position was at 4,000 feet, and the vertical speed descent was at 2,029 feet per minute. So it wasn't a simulation right to a ditching, and it wasn't actually a simulation of a ditching or an attempted ditching. It was simply a fuel exhaustion at a certain location in the southern Indian Ocean. And, you know, you could argue we haven't learned that much from the simulator. It was simply the fuel amount loaded for flight MH150 and not MH370. And it was a simulation in fast forward mode to a crash at fuel exhaustion. But as I say, not a simulation of a ditching at a specific location.
That flight, correct me if I'm wrong, Richard, 150, that was Kuala Lumpur to Jeddah, was it not?
That's right. Yeah.
About a month, he flew that about a month earlier, that particular flight?
No, it was a couple of weeks earlier.
Couple of weeks earlier. Yeah, yeah. From Paul, I'm Paul. Thanks for the updates. Keep up the good work. As a layman in aviation-related subjects, it might not be economically prohibited for. It might not be. Sorry, I started this again. I'm Paul. Thanks for the updates. Keep up the good work. As a layman in aviation-related subjects, it might not be economically prohibited for airlines and manufacturers to consider the following. One, installation of acoustic locator beacons activated upon impact, located in the rear of the aircraft. Two, upgrade existing or developing new CVR to record up to 25 hours. Redesign existing black boxes to be ejected from the aircraft upon impact and even float. And major airlines to purchase a full package from Inmarsat or other satellite companies to triangulate the location of the aircraft, especially on transoceanic flights. Four questions there, Richard.
Well, four answers. Number one, um, exist already. We have acoustic locator beacons activated upon impact. So don't quite know why that's on your list, Paul. Uh, Number two, CVR to record up to 25 hours. That is now in force. That has changed. So a tick in that box. Number three, why eject upon impact when the data is streamed by satellite? All we want is to know the data in the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder. And the simplest way is to wait until we find the black boxes, whether they're ejected or not. The simplest way is just to stream that data by satellite. And enforcing the airlines to purchase the full package, well, that is now mandatory for all airlines operating larger aircraft on transoceanic routes, will become mandatory for all aircraft eventually, whatever route. And the ADT gives the position every minute, so you don't need to triangulate anything. The position is again streamed by satellite every minute.
There you go. Whiskey Juliet Papa 005 asks, great work as always, guys. Question, whereabouts on the aircraft is the ADT system beacon installed? Pure curiosity as to where statistically is the most likely to be intact after a crash. My guess is aft in the main fuselage and up high. Additionally, presumably the system cannot be disabled in any way by anyone, intentionally or accidentally. Thanks again for ongoing efforts, James from Newcastle in New South Wales, Australia.
Jeffrey, we're getting so many detailed questions on this. I wonder how many potential terrorists and hijackers there are out there who want to
Yeah.
know how to where it is, how to disable it, and so I'm going to be very vague in my answer. It depends on which ADT or LADR system is installed by which aircraft manufacturer. Some are in the avionics bay, some in the rear of the fuselage, some in the vertical stabilizer embedded, some in the tail cone, some in the wing aft structure, and all are possible. And no, it cannot be disabled, not even if you crawl out onto the wing or down to the tail cone. It is an autonomous system. If you remove the data feeds and if you remove the power cable, it will just go into autonomous mode and it works on its own battery. So then you've got to take the box out and physically hammer it to death. It's a big exercise for a potential terrorist or hijacker or even a curious passenger.
Final question from Ewan Dobson, fan. Question, could the same incident happen with an Airbus instead of a Boeing? Is there some flaw that Boeing has that maybe Airbus doesn't have?
No.
I can answer
This
that
is
too.
this is just as valid for Airbus or Boeing or Embraer or Bombardier or any manufacturer of aircraft. So no, you can't pick sides between Boeing and Airbus at all.
On that note, I mean, I know Boeing's been in the news a lot over the last few years with some tragic crashes and a couple of incidents, but the reality is both manufacturers have had tragic crashes. Both manufacturers have had serious incidents. And when you delve into the number of service bulletins and airworthiness directives, which are issued all the time, in fact, it's about 50-50 equal. There's no real winner in that. They both build really good aeroplanes. So
Yeah,
I think
and MH370 happened to be a Boeing 777, but Air France was an Airbus. So
A330. Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So, viewers, that's all we have time for today. Thank you very much indeed for tuning in, and we really do appreciate your support. We love your comments, we love your likes, and please subscribe if you aren't subscribing. Richard, thank you very much indeed for all your work on this today. And viewers, please uh, check in with our poll on whether you think MH370 will be found. And tomorrow we'll come back with some more questions. Are we not, Richard? Questions tomorrow?
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah,
And the poll will keep open till Sunday night.
terrific. So once again, thank you all very much for tuning in, and thank you, Richard. And good evening from me, and it'll be good morning from you.
You're welcome, Jeffrey, and have a good evening.
Thank you.